Well, hello. Hi, it's Pastor Trina Turner, and we are in our week 5 of This Present Darkness, reading with Lady T. Welcome, Pastor Trina Turner, week 5 of This Present Darkness. I'm so glad to have every one of you joining in again on today, and just looking forward to getting ready to read these next chapters. Oh my goodness, I'm enjoying it. I hope you all are having a good time with these books, with this book, and with all of the readings. Woo! Yes. So thank you. Come on into the reading room. Pastor Trina Turner here. Excited to have you on today. Mondays. Mondays seem to be a really good time for reading. And so my video is glitchy just a little bit. I don't know if it's glitching for you all or not. Come on in, Pastor Trina Turner. Glad to have you. Let me know. Somebody comment in the line. Is the video on your end blinking off and on or glitching? Somebody comment and let me know. Are you receiving anything that's stopping? Every little bit, it almost blinks. Like there, just did it again. Those are, hi, Auntie M. M, is the video glitching for you on your end? If you watch it for a little bit, like right then, it just did a glitch. I don't know if that's just on my end or if that's, hey, Pastor Linda, so glad you're here. Welcome. I'm checking. Video's good. Thank you, Donald. I'm so glad you're here. Video's good on your end. Leo, it's fine on your end. Awesome. Woo! I'm so excited. Thank you all for joining. Can you believe we have read for 4 weeks in a row now? And if you're missing any of the lesson series leading up to the lesson, oh my goodness, let me put my right hat on. I'm just reading right now. If you're missing any of the readings, I'd like to invite you to pick them up. Of course, you can always go online and purchase the book and read it, and I'm certain it's even available on audio. However, when we started this sanctuary in place, this shelter in place, it's just one of the services we wanted to provide for those of you at the end of your day, starting off your week on Monday, to just be able to relax, hear a familiar voice, and just be entertained. And our readings, I've noticed, have been about an hour and 45 minutes rather. So welcome. Just glad to have you all. Come on in, relax. We'll be reading in just a little bit. I'm Pastor Trina Turner, and I am reading for us today This Present Darkness by Frank E. Peretti. And we're just a minute or so past 5. I love all the punctual people, and I do want to honor your time. But we got just a couple of more. Somebody said, yeah, but Frank reading is not you. You got that right. And as all of you authors out there write your book, I just want to tell you, when I grow up, it's one of the things that I'm going to do is to be a professional audiobook reader. I love reading and would love and be honored to read some of your books as well. Okay. So glad you all are on. It's 5:02. I'm going to give it one more minute, and we're going to go ahead and get into our lesson. It's interesting. Bishop is recording right outside the door, and I forgot to close all the windows, so I'm not certain if you hear him or not, but he's at the end of his, and I'll be at the beginning of mine in just a second. Welcome. So glad to see you. Yes, Dolores, thank you for being here. This book, I haven't read it. I guess it's been a couple of years since I've read it. I have read it a few times. And I keep wanting to peek ahead, and I'm like, no, nope. I'm just going to read it and experience it with the group reading, with the listeners on with. So I'm going to just get ready. Woo woo. All right, let's see. Pastor Rashima sending me stuff while I'm in this. Thank you, Pastor Rashima, but I'm not going to look right now. Okay, let's do this. It is now 5:03. I'm Pastor Trina Turner. You are listening to Reading with Lady T. I'm a pastor, staff pastor, bishop's wife at Victory and Praise Church, and we have been reading the book This Present Darkness by Frank E. Peretti. And we are now in week 5, which means we're going to start with chapter 17. We read 4 chapters every week, so it's a little aggressive. And thank you for being here. Let's go ahead and do this together. I'll need glasses. Chapter 17. In the faraway, secluded valley, in the little cluster of unlabeled buildings hidden by rocky crags, a hurried transition was in full swing. In the office complex, sitting at desks and work tables, scurrying up and down the aisles, dashing in and out the doors, running up and down the stairways, over 200 people of all ages, descriptions, and nationalities were typing letters, going through files, checking records, balancing accounts, chattering on telephones in different languages. Maintenance people in blue coveralls brought in large stacks of boxes and crates on hand trucks, and the office workers meticulously began to fill the boxes with the contents of the file cabinets, with any office paraphernalia not immediately needed, with other books and records. Outside, trucks were being loaded with the crates as more maintenance people driving little grounds tractors went about the complex, shutting down various hookups and utilities and boarding up any buildings no longer occupied. Nearby, on the porch of the big stone house at the edge of the grounds, a woman stood watching. She was tall and slender, with long jet black hair. She wore black, loose-fitting clothes, and she clutched her shoulder bag close to her side with pale, trembling hands. She looked this way and that, evidently trying to relax herself. She took a few deep breaths. She reached into her bag and brought out a pair of dark sunglasses with which she covered her eyes. Then she stepped from the porch and started across the plaza toward the office building. Her steps were firm and deliberate. Her eyes remained straight ahead. A few office personnel passed and saluted her, pressing their palms together in front of their chins and bowing slightly. She nodded at them and kept walking. The office staff saluted her in the same way as she entered, and she smiled at them, not speaking a word. Upon receiving her smile, they returned to their feverish work. The office manager, a well-dressed woman with tightly pinned hair, stepped up and gave a slight bow and said, "Good morning. What does the maidservant require?" The maidservant smiled and said, "I'd like to run off some copies. I can do it immediately." "Thank you. I'd like to run them off myself." "Certainly. I'll warm the machine up for you." The woman scurried toward a small room off to the side, and the maidservant followed. Several accountants and filing clerks, some Oriental, some East Indian, some European, bowed as she passed and then went back to their consultations with each other. The office manager had the copier ready in less than a minute. "Thank you. You may go now," said the maidservant. "Certainly," answered the woman. "I am at your disposal if you have any problems or questions. Thank you." The manager left, and the maidservant closed the door behind her, shutting out the rest of the office and any intrusions. Then quickly, the maidservant reached into her bag and brought out a small book. She leafed through it, skimming over the handwritten pages until she found what she was looking for. Then, laying the book open and face down on the copier, she started pressing the buttons and copying page after page. 40 pages later, she turned off the machine, folded the copies neatly, and placed them in a compartment of her bag along with the little book. She left the office directly and went back to the big stone house. The house was majestic in its size and decor, with a large stone hearth soaring rough-beamed ceilings. The maidservant hurried up the thickly carpeted staircase to her bedroom and closed the door behind her. Placing the little book on her stately antique vanity, she opened a drawer and pulled out some brown wrapping paper and twine. The paper already had a name written on it, the addressee, Alexander M. Cassatt. The return address included the name J. Langstroth. She quickly rewrapped the book as if it had never been opened, then bound the package with string. Elsewhere in the house, in a very large office, a middle-aged, roundly built man dressed in loose trousers and a tunic sat, Indian fashion, on a large cushion. His eyes were closed, his breathing deep. The fine furnishings of a man of great prestige and power surrounded him. Souvenirs from around the world, such as swords, war clubs, African artifacts, religious relics, and several rather grotesque idols of the East. A battleship of a desk with built in computer console, multi lined telephone, and an intercom. A long, deep cushioned couch with matching hand carved oak chairs and coffee table. Hunting trophies of bear, elk, moose, and lion. Without hearing a knock, the man spoke loftily. Come in, Susan. The big oak door opened silently, and the maidservant entered, carrying the brown paper package. Without opening his eyes, the man said, Put it on my desk. The maidservant did so, and the man began to stir from his motionless position, opening his eyes and stretching his arms as if awakening from sleep. So, you finally found it, he said with a teasing smile. It was there all the time. With all the packing and rearranging, it got shoved over in a corner. The man rose from his cushion, stretched his legs, and walked a few laps around the office. I really don't know what it is, he said as if in answering a question. I didn't wonder, said the maidservant. He smiled condescendingly and said, Oh, maybe not, but it felt like you did. He went up behind her and placed his hands on her shoulders, speaking in her ear. Sometimes I can read you so very well, and sometimes you drift away. You've been feeling so troubled lately. Why? Oh, all the moving and, I guess, the upheaval. He put his arms around her waist and held her close as he said, Don't let it bother you. We're going to a far better place. I have a house all picked out. You'll love it. I grew up in that town, you know. No, no, not really. It won't be the same town at all, not as you remember it. It will be better, but you don't believe that, do you? As I said, I grew up in Ashton. All you want was to get out of there. So you can understand why my feelings are confused. He twirled around her. He twirled her around and laughed playfully as he looked into her eyes. Yes, I know. On the one hand, you have no desire at all for the town, and on the other hand, you sneak off to attend the carnival. She blushed a little and looked at the floor. I was searching for something from my past, something from which to envision my future. He held up his hand and said, There is no past. You should have stayed with me. I hold the answers for you now. Yes, I can see that. I couldn't before. He laughed and went behind his desk. Well, good, good. We don't need any more meetings held in hiding places behind a noisy carnival. You should have seen how embarrassed our friends were to have to meet there. But why did you even have to come looking for me? Why did you have to drag them along? He sat at the desk and began handling a wicked looking ceremonial knife with a golden handle and a razor sharp blade. Looking over the edge of the blade at her, he said, Because, dear maidservant, I do not trust you. I love you. I am one in essence with you. What? He held up the knife to the level of his eye and peered down the edge of the blade at her, his eyes as sharply cutting as the knife. I do not trust you. You are a woman given to many conflicting passions. I cannot harm the plan. I am only one person among myriads. He rose and came around to the side of the desk where other knives were stuck into the carved head of some pagan idol. You, dear Susan, share my life, my secrets, my purposes. I have to protect my interests. With that, he dropped the knife point first, and it thudded into the idol's head. She smiled in acquiescence and sidled up to him, giving him an alluring kiss. I am and will always be yours, she said. He gave her a sly smile, and the cutting look never left his eyes, and he answered, Yes, of course you are. High above the valley, amid the rocks and crevices of the mountaintop, two figures concealed themselves. One, the silver haired man who had never been here before, continually watched the activity before. He was stately and mighty, his piercing eyes full of wisdom. The other was Tal, captain of the host. This is what you're looking for, said the silver haired man. Rafar had business there only days ago. Tal peered down into the valley. The swarms of black demons were too numerous to even estimate. The strong man? He asked. Undoubtedly, with a cloud of guards and warriors all around him. We've been unable to penetrate it yet. And she's right in the middle of it. The spirit has been steadily opening her eyes and calling her. She is close to the strong man, dangerous. Of the remnant have placed a blindness and stupor on the demonic host all around her. At present, it will buy you time, but little more. And you can only expect, Tal grimaced, my general, it will take more than a stupor for us to break through to her. We can barely hold the town of Ashton, much less take on the strong man directly. And you can only expect this buildup to worsen. Their numbers increase tenfold each day. Yes, they are preparing, that's for certain. But at the same time, her conflicts continue to grow. Soon, she won't be able to conceal her true feelings and intentions from her lord down there. Tal, she has learned of the suicide. Tal looked directly at the general. I understand she and Patricia were very close. The general nodded. It jolted her, which made her more receptive, but her time of safety is limited. Here's your next step. The Universal Consciousness Society is holding a special fundraising and promotional dinner in New York for its many cohorts and members in the United Nations. Cassip can attend because of his present activities here. He will send Susan, however, to represent him. She'll be closely escorted, but this will be the one time she'll be out from under the strong man's demonic cover. The spirit knows she plans to get away and make contact with one remaining friend on the outside, who can in turn contact your newspapermen. She'll take that chance, Tal. You must arrange for her to succeed. Tal's first response was, Is there prayer cover in New York? You will have it. Tal looked at all the swarms below, and they must not find out. No, they must not suspect anything has happened until you can get Susan out for good. They would destroy her if they knew. And who is the friend? His name is Kevin Weed, a former classmate and boyfriend. To work then. I have some more prayer to gather in. Godspeed, dear Captain. Tal climbed behind some large rocks for concealment before he unfurled his wings. Then, with the silence and grace of a drifting cloud, he floated up over the mountaintop. Once he had cleared the summit and could no longer be seen by any of the swarms in the valley, his wings snapped into a rushing pattern and he shot forward like a bullet, trailing a brilliant arc of light across the sky and over the horizon. Marshall and Bernice drove through the forested countryside in the big brown Buick, talking about themselves, their past, their families, and anything else that came to mind. They were getting tired of only talking about business anyway, and finding it enjoyable to share each other's company. I grew up Presbyterian, said Marshall. Now I don't know what I am. My folks were Episcopalian, said Bernice. I don't think I was ever anything. They dragged me along to church every Sunday, and I couldn't wait to get out of there. I didn't mind that much. I had a good Sunday school teacher. Yeah, maybe that's where I missed out. I never went to Sunday school. Oh, I think a kid needs to know something about God. What if he doesn't exist? See what I mean? You never went to Sunday school. The Buick came to a crossroads, and a sign indicated the way back to Ashton was to the left. Marshall turned left. Bernice answered one of Hogan's questions. Nope, no parents alive anymore. Dad died in '76 and Mom died Let's see, 2 years ago. That's too bad. And then I lost my only sibling, Patricia. Is that right? Boy, I'm sorry. It's a lonely world out there sometimes. Yeah, I suppose so. And I wonder who there is to meet in Ashton. She only looked at him and said, I'm not hunting, Marshall. About a mile ahead of them was a wide spot in the road referred to as Baker, a little town indicated by the smallest possible dot on the map. It was one of those typical roadsides where truckers and four-wheelers hunting for drop in hunters drop in for black coffee and cold eggs. Blink just once and you'd miss it. Above the Buick, whisking just over the tops of the trees, Nathan and Armith kept a careful eye on the vehicle, their wings rushing in an even pattern and their bodies trailing two streaks of diamond-studded light. So, this is where it all begins, said Nathan with a playful tone. And you have been chosen to strike the blow, responded Armith. Nathan smiled. Child's play. Armith teased him a little. I'm sure Tal could pick someone else who would like the honor. Nathan drew his sword and it flashed like a lightning bolt. Oh no, dear Armith, I've waited long enough. I'll take it. Nathan banked away from Armith, dropped down over the roadway as it wound through the tall trees and began to keep pace with the car. Flying lazily about 30 feet above it, he kept his eye on the little town of Baker now approaching, made a quick judgment as to the coasting distance the car could travel, and then at the right moment, he hurled his sword like a fiery spear downward. The sword traveled a perfect trajectory and shot through the hood of the car. The engine died. Nuts, said Marshall, shifting quickly into neutral. What's wrong? Asked Bernice. Something's broke. Marshall tried to restart the engine as the car continued to coast along. No response. Probably electrical, he muttered. Better pull over at that station. Yeah, I know. The Buick limped into a little filling station in Baker and rolled to a stop right at the front door. Marshall opened the hood. I'm going to excuse myself, said Bernice. Go for me too, will you? Marshall said crossly, looking here and there around the engine compartment. Bernice went to the next little building, the Evergreen Tavern. Age and settling were slowly swallowing it up from the bottom up, and one end was badly sunken. The paint on the floor was peeling. The neon beer logo on the window still worked, though, and the jukebox inside was twanging some country hit. Bernice pushed the door open. The bottom scraped a worn arc across the linoleum and went inside. Twisting her nose a little at the blue cigarette smoke that had replaced the air, just a few men sat in the establishment, probably the first of the logging crews getting off work. They were talking loudly, swapping stories, cussing it up. Bernice looked directly toward the back of the room, trying to find the little men and women signs. Ah, there was the restrooms. One of the men at a nearby table said, Hey, baby, how's it going? Bernice wasn't even going to look his direction, but did just happen to give him a glance and an appropriate dirty look. A little too much local color in this place, she thought. She slowed her walk, her eyes locked on him. He looked back at her with a boozy, lazy-eyed smile on his bearded face. Another man said, Looks like you got our attention, buddy. Bernice kept looking at him. She approached the table and took an even closer look. The hair was long and tangled, bound into a ponytail with a rubber band. The eyes were glassy and now heavily lined, but she knew this man. The man's friend said, Good evening, ma'am. Don't let him bother you. He's just having a good time. Right, Weed? Weed? Bernice asked. Kevin Weed? Kevin Weed just looked up at her, enjoying the view, and finally saying a little, Can I buy you a beer? Bernice came closer to him, made sure he could clearly see her face. Do you remember me? Bernice Kruger? Weed only looked puzzled. Do you remember Pat Kruger? A little light slowly began to dawn in Weed's face. Pat Kruger? Who are you? I'm Bernice, Pat's sister. Do you remember me? We met a couple of times. You and Pat's roommate were going together. Weed brightened and smiled, and then he cursed and excused himself. Bernice Kruger, Pat's sister. He cursed again and excused himself again. What are you doing in this place? Just passing through. And I will take a small Coke, thank you. Weed smiled and looked at his friends. Their eyes and mouths were getting wide and they were starting to laugh. Weed said with a leer, I think it's time you boys found another table. They gathered up their hard hats and lunch boxes and laughed. Yeah, you got it, Weed. Dan, Weed hollered, a small Coke for the lady here. Dan had to stare for a moment at the nice girl who had come into a place like his. He got the Coke and brought it to her. So what have you been doing? Weed asked her. Bernice had the pen and her notebook out. She told him a little bit about what she'd been doing and what she was doing now, and then she said, I haven't seen you since before Pat's death. Yeah, hey, I'm really sorry about that. Kevin, can you tell me anything about it? What do you know? Nothing much, no more than what I read in the papers. What about Pat's roommate? Do you hear from her anymore? Bernice noticed Weed's eyes widen and his mouth drop open the moment she mentioned the girl. Man, this world is getting smaller all the time, he said. You saw her? Bernice couldn't believe her good fortune. Well, yeah, sort of. When? Bernice insisted. But just for a little while. Where? When? Bernice was having a very difficult time holding herself back. I saw her at the carnival. In Ashton? Yeah, in Ashton. I just ran into her. She called my name and I turned around and there she was. What did she say? Did she say where she's living now? Weed fidgeted a little. Man, I don't know. I don't really care. She dumped me, ran off with that other goon. She was even with him that night. What was her name again? Susan Jacobson? She's a real heartbreaker, she is. Do you have any idea? Did she give you any idea of where I might find her? I have to talk to her about Pat. She might know something. Man, I don't know. She didn't talk to me for very long at all. She was in a hurry, had to meet her new boyfriend or something. She wanted my phone number. That was about it. Bernice couldn't let go of her hope. Not yet. Are you sure she didn't give you some idea where she's living now or any way to get in touch with her? Weed shrugged drunkenly. Kevin, I've been trying to find her for ages. I've got to talk to her. Weed was bitter. Would talk to her boyfriend, that fat little geezer with all the bucks. No, that wasn't really a legitimate hunch that ran through Bernice's mind. Or was it? Kevin, she said, what did Susan look like that night? He was staring off into space like a drunken and jilted lover. Foxy, he said. Long black hair, black dress, sexy shades. Bernice felt her stomach tighten into a knot as she said, and what about her boyfriend? Did you see him? Yeah, later. Susan acted like she didn't even know me when he came into the picture. Well, what did he look like? Like some wimp from Fat City. It had to have been his money. That's why Susan latched onto him. Bernice picked up her pen in a shaking hand. What's your phone number? He gave it to her. Address? He mumbled that off too. Now, you say she asked you for your phone number. Yeah, I don't know why. Maybe things aren't working out with the lover boy. Did you give it to her? Yeah, maybe I'm a sucker, but yeah, I did. So she just might be calling you. He shrugged. Kevin, Bernice gave him one of her cards. Listen carefully to me. Are you listening? He looked at her and said, yeah. If she calls, if you hear anything from her at all, please give her my name and number and tell her I want to talk to her. Get her number so I can call her. Will you do that? He took the card and nodded. Yeah, sure. She finished her Coke and prepared to leave. He looked at her with his dull, glassy eyes. Hey, you doing anything tonight? If you hear from Susan, call me. We'll have plenty to talk about then. He looked at her card again. Yeah, sure. A few moments later, Bernice was back at the filling station just in time to see Marshall start the car up. The old and bent station owner was looking at the engine and shaking his head. Hey, that did it, Marshall shouted from behind the wheel. Heck, I didn't do a thing, said the old man. High above the filling station, Nathan soared skyward to join Armith, his sword retrieved. Done, he said. And now we'll see how the captain and Gilio succeed in New York. The Buick started out again, and Nathan and Armith followed behind and above it like two kites on strings. Chapter 18. Hank started the Sunday morning service with a good, rousing song, one Mary performed on the piano particularly well. Both were in good spirits and feeling encouraged. In spite of the approaching sounds of battle, they sensed God in his infinite wisdom was indeed working out a very mighty and effective plan for reestablishing his kingdom in the town of Ashton. Victories large and small were in the making, and Hank knew it had to be the hand of God. For one thing, this morning he would be ministering to an almost entirely new congregation. At least it sure felt that way. Many of the old dissenters had dropped out of the church and taken their embittering presence with them, and the whole mood and spirit of the place had risen several notches because of their absence. Sure, Alf Brummel, Gordon Mayer, and Sam Turner still hovered about, brooding together like some kind of hit squad, but none of them were in the service this morning, and a lot of new, fresh faces were. The Forsyths' example had been followed by their numerous friends and acquaintances. Some married couples, some singles, some students. Grandma Duster was there, as strong and as healthy as ever, and ready for a spiritual fight. John and Patty Coleman were back, and John couldn't keep from grinning in his joy and excitement. Of the rest, Hank had only met once. Next to Andy and June, looking a little sheepish, sat Ron Forsythe, along with his girlfriend, a short, very made-up sophomore. Hank had to choke down some very strong emotions when he saw the Forsythes enter, accompanied by their son. It was a miracle, a genuine act of grace by the living God. He would have shouted hallelujah right there, but he didn't want to scare the young fellow away. This could be one of those kid glove cases. After the first song, Hank figured he might as well address the situation before him. Well, he said informally, I don't know whether to call all you people visitors or refugees or what. They all laughed and exchanged glances. Hank continued, why don't we just take a moment here to introduce ourselves? I guess you probably know who I am. I'm Hank Bush, the pastor, and this flower sitting at the piano is my wife, Mary. Mary stood quickly and smiled meekly and then sat down again. Why don't we go around the room here and tell everybody who we are? And the first roll call of the remnant took place as the angels and demons watched. Cryone and Triskel stood at their post right beside Hank and Mary, while Cigna and his squad, now numbering 10, kept a hedge about the building. Again, Lucius had carried on a bitter argument with Cigna, trying to gain admittance, but he knew better than to push the matter too far. Hank Bush was bad enough, but now he had a whole church full of praying saints. The heavenly warriors were enjoying their first real advantage. Lucius finally ordered his demons to remain outside and hear what they could. The only demons that managed to enter had come in with their human hosts, and now they sat here and there in the congregation, brooding over this horrible development. Sion stood near the back like a hen watching over her brood, and Seth stayed near the Forsyths in the group with them. There was power, hallelujah, in this place today, and everyone could feel it grow as each new person stood and introduced himself. To Hank, it seemed just like the gathering of a special army. Ralph Metzer, sophomore at Whitmore. Judy Kemp, sophomore at Whitmore. Greg and Eva Smith, friends of the Forsyths. Bill and Betty Jones, we run the Whatnot shop over on 8th Street. Mike Stewart, I live with the Joneses and I work out at the mill. Cal and Ginger Barton, we're still new in town. Cecil and Miriam Cooper, we're sure glad to see y'all here. Ben Squires, I'm the guy who brings your mail if you live out on the west side. Tom Harris, and this is my beloved wife, Mabel. Welcome to all of you and praise the Lord. Clint Neal, I work at the filling station. Greg and Nancy Jenny, I teach and she's a writer. Andy Forsythe, praise the Lord. June Forsythe, and amen to that. Ron stood to his feet and put his hands in his pockets and looked at the floor a lot as he said, I'm Ron Forsythe, and this here is Cynthia. And I met the pastor at the cave, and his voice cracked with emotion. I just want to thank you people for praying for me and for caring. He stood there for a moment, looking at the floor while tears welled up in his eyes. June stood beside him and addressed the group on his behalf. Ron wants you all to know that he and Cynthia gave their hearts to Jesus last night. Everyone smiled with delight and murmured encouragement, and that loosened Ron up enough to say, "Yeah, and we flushed all our drugs down the toilet." Oh, that brought the house down. With increased joy and fervor, the roll call continued. Outside, the demons listened with great alarm and hissed exclamations of foreboding. "Rafar must know of this," one said. Lucius, his wings half unfurled just to keep his fussing ranks from pestering him, stood still and brooded. One little demon hovered about his head and cried out, "What shall we do, Master Lucius? Shall we find Rafar?" "Back to whatever you were doing," he hissed. "Let me see to informing Baal Rafar myself." They gathered around him, wanting to hear his next order. Lately it seemed he had spoken so very little. "What are you all staring at?" he shrieked. "Go do mischief. Let me worry about these petty little saints." They flurried away in all directions, and Lucius stood in his place outside the church window. Tell Rafar indeed. Let Rafar humble himself enough to ask. Lucius would not be his lackey. In this part of New York City, things were tailored for the elite and discerning. The shops, the boutiques, the restaurants were the exclusive kind, the hotels quite lavish. Carefully groomed flowering trees grew in round stucco planters along the sidewalks, and maintenance workers kept the streets and walks spotless. Among the hurried shoppers and the browsers crowding the district were two very large men in tan tunics strolling the sidewalk looking here and there. "The Gibson Hotel," Tal read on the front of an old distinguished stone building that towered 30 stories above them. "I see no activity," said Giglio. "It's early yet. They'll be along. Let's be quick about this." The two of them slipped through the big front doors and into the hotel lobby. People passed on all sides of them, and sometimes right through them, but that, of course, was of no consequence. Within moments, they had checked the schedule at the desk for the hotel's banquet facilities and verified that the grand ballroom was reserved that night for the Universal Consciousness Society. "The general's information was right," Tal commented with pleasure. They hurried down the long, thickly carpeted hallway past a barber shop, a beauty salon, a shoe shine nook, and a gift shop, and at length came to two huge oak doors with lavishly wrought brass handles. They passed through and found themselves in the grand ballroom, now filled with dining tables adorned with crystal place settings and white linen tablecloths. One lone, long-stemmed rose in a bud vase stood on every table. The hotel caterers were hurriedly making final preparations, setting out the artfully folded napkins and wine glasses. Tal checked the place cards at the head table. One towards the end said, "Casa Omni Corporation." They went through a nearby exit door and looked right and they looked left. Down the hall to the left and toward the back of the hotel was the ladies' lounge. They went in, past a few women primping in the mirrors, and found what they were after. The very last stall designated for use by the handicapped. It was built against the rear wall of the hotel just below a window large enough for a limber human to crawl through. Tal reached up, broke the lock, and tested the window to make sure it would open easily and close easily. Giglio passed quickly through the wall into the alley where he found a large dumpster and with incredible ease moved it several feet so that it was situated below the window. He then arranged some crates and garbage cans in a very handy stair-step fashion against the dumpster. Tal joined him and the two went up the alley to the street. Down one block was a phone booth. Tal picked up the receiver and made sure everything was functioning. "Here they come," Giglio warned, and they leaped through the wall of a department store and peered out a window just as a long black limousine and then another began an ominous parade down the street toward the hotel. Inside the limousine sat dignitaries and other VIPs from many different nations and races. Within and on top were demons, large, black, warty, and fierce, their yellow eyes darting warily in every direction. Tal and Giglio watched with fascination. In the sky overhead, other demons began flocking to the hotel like swallows, their black winged outlines silhouetted against the reddening sky. A significant gathering, Captain, said Gilio. Tal nodded, and he continued watching. Amid the limousines were many taxis, also carrying a vast cross section of humanity: Orientals, Africans, Europeans, Westerners, Arabians, people of great power, esteem, and dignity from all over the world. As written in the scriptures, the kings of the earth, Tal observed, being made drunk with the wine of the great harlot's immorality. Babylon the Great, said Gilio, the great harlot arising at last. Yes, universal consciousness, the world religion, the doctrine of demons spreading among all nations. Babylon revived right before the end of the age. Hence, the return of the prince of Babylon, Refar, of course, and that explains why we were called. We were the last to confront him. Gilio only winced at that. My captain, our last battle with Refar is not a pleasant memory, nor a pleasant expectation. Do you expect him here? No, this gathering is only a party before the real battle, and the real battle is slated for the town of Ashton. Tal and Gilio remained where they were, watching the gathering forces of mankind and of satanic evil converge on the Gibson Hotel. They kept looking for one key person, Susan Jacobson, Alexander Cassop's maidservant. They finally spotted her in a very fancy Lincoln Continental, probably Cassop's private vehicle, driven by a hired chauffeur. She was accompanied by two escorts sitting on either side of her. She'll be watched closely, Tal said. Come on, we need a better look. They stalked quickly through the department store, through walls, displays, and people, then ducked under the street and came up inside the restaurant right across from the hotel's main door. All around them, well-dressed people sat at quiet, candlelit tables eating expensive French cuisine. They hurried to a front window right next to an older couple enjoying seafood and wine and watched as the Lincoln Carrie and Susan pulled up in front of the hotel. Susan's door was opened by the red-coated doorman. One escort got out and extended his hand to help her disembark. She stepped out and was immediately joined by the other escort. The two tuxedo-clad escorts were very handsome, but also very intimidating. They kept very close to her. Susan wore a very loose-fitting evening gown that draped her body stunningly and cascaded to her feet. Gilio had to ask, Are her plans the same as ours? Tal answered assuredly. The general has yet to err. Gilio only shook his head in apprehension. To the alley, said Tal. They moved along under the crack-cobbled alley and surfaced to a hiding place behind a fire escape. Night had fallen and it was very dark in the alley. From their vantage point, they could count 20 pairs of shifting yellow eyes evenly spaced along the alley and against the hotel. About 100 sentries are around the place, said Tal. Under better circumstances, a mere handful, Gilio muttered. You need only concern yourself with these 20. Gilio took his sword in hand. He could feel the prayers of the local saints. It will be difficult, he said. The prayer cover is limited. You don't have to defeat them, answered Tal. Just get them to chase after you. We need all the alley clear for just a few moments. They waited. The air in the alley was still and dank. The demons moved very little, remaining at their posts, mumbling back and forth in different languages, their sulphurous breath forming a strange, meandering ribbon of yellow vapor that hung along the alley like a putrid river floating in midair. Tal and Gilio could feel themselves getting more and more tense, like ever-tightening springs with each passing second. The banquet must be in progress by now. At any time, Susan could excuse herself from the table. More time passed. Suddenly, both Tal and Gilio felt the prompting of the spirit. Tal looked at Gilio, and Gilio nodded. She was on her way. They watched the window. The light from the ladies' lounge shone brightly through it. They could just barely hear the sound of the opening and closing as patrons came and went. The door opened. High heels clicked on the tile floor, moving toward the window. The demons began to stir a little, muttering among themselves. The door to the last stall was swung open. Gilio's hand gripped his sword. He began to breathe deeply, his big torso heaving in and out, the power of God coursing through him. Their eyes were riveted on the window. The demons became more alert, their yellow eyes wide open and darting back and forth. They were talking louder. The shadow of a woman's head suddenly appeared on the window. A woman's hand reached for the latch. Tal touched Gilio on the shoulder, and Gilio instantly dropped into the ground. Only a fraction of a second had passed. Yaha! Came the sudden deafening war cry from Gilio's powerful lungs, and the whole alley instantly exploded in a blinding flash of white light as Gilio shot up out of the ground, his sword flashing and shimmering, tracing brilliant arcs across the air. The demons jumped, hooting and shrieking in terror, but recovered immediately and drew their swords. The alley echoed with metallic ringing, and the red glow of their blades danced like comets on the high brick walls. Gilio stood tall and strong, and he bellowed out a laugh that shook the ground. Ha ha ha! Now, you black lizards, I'll test your mettle. A big spirit on the end shrieked out an order, and all 20 demons converged on Gilio like starving predators, their swords flashing and their fangs bared. Gilio shot straight up out of their midst like a slippery bar of soap and added an agile spin as he went, throwing light everywhere in colorful spirals. The demons unfurled their wings and shot up after him. As Tal watched, Gilio looped and corkscrewed all over the sky like a loose balloon, laughing, taunting, and teasing, staying just out of their reach. The demons were in a blind rage by now. The alley was empty. The window was opening. Tal was beneath the window in an instant, unglorified and concealed in the darkness. He grabbed Susan the moment her hand came through the window and pulled her so hard she practically shot through the window on his strength alone. She was dressed in a simple blouse and jeans and had small slippers on her feet. From the neck up, she was still gorgeous. From the neck down, she was ready for running down dark alleys. Tal helped her find her way down from the dumpster and then prodded her up the alley and out to the street where she hesitated, looked this way and that, and then spotted the phone booth. She ran like the wind in a terrible, desperate hurry. Tal followed her, trying to stay as concealed as possible. He looked back over his shoulder. Gilio's diversion had worked. For now, Gilio was the main problem for the demons, and their attention was far from this one frantically running woman. Susan leaped into the booth and slammed the door behind her. She took a pile of coins from her jeans pocket, dialed the operator, and put through a long-distance call. Somewhere between Ashton and the little roadside of Baker, in a rundown warehouse refashioned into a low-rent apartments, Kevin Weed was awakened from an exhausted sleep by the ringing of his phone. He rolled her over on his mattress and lifted the receiver. "Yeah, who is this?" he asked. "Is this Kevin?" came the desperate voice on the other end. Kevin perked up a little. It was a woman's voice. "Yeah, that's me. Who is this?" In the phone booth, Susan looked up and down the street fearfully as she said, "Kevin, this is Susan Jacobson." Kevin was beginning to wonder about all this. "Hey, what do you want with me anyway?" "I need your help, Kevin, and I don't have much time." "There isn't much time." "Time for what?" he asked very dully. "Please listen. Write it down if you have to." "I don't got a pencil." "Then just listen. Now you know about the Ashton Clarion, the newspaper in Ashton?" Yeah, I know about it. Bernice Kruger works there. She's the sister of my old roommate, Pat, the one who committed suicide." "Oh man, what's going on around here?" "Kevin, will you do something for me? Will you get a hold of Bernice Kruger and at the Clarion? And Kevin?" "Yeah, I'm listening." "Kevin, I'm in trouble. I need your help." "So where's your boyfriend?" "He's the one I'm afraid of. You know about him. Tell Bernice all about Alexander Cassip, everything you know." Kevin was nonplussed. "So what do I know?" "Tell her what happened, you know, between us with Cassip, the whole thing. Tell her what Cassip's up to." "I don't get this. I don't have time to explain. Just tell her. Tell her that Cassup is taking over the whole town. And let her know I have some very important information about her sister Pat. I'll try to reach her, but I'm afraid the Clarion phone might be bugged. Kevin, I need you to be there to answer the phone to... Susan was frustrated, full of emotion, unable to select the right words. She had too much to say in too little time. You're not making a whole lot of sense, Kevin muttered. You own something? Just do it, Kevin, please. I'll call you again as soon as I can, or I'll write or do something. But please call Bernice Kruger and tell her everything you know about Cassup and about me. Tell her it was me she saw at the carnival. How am I supposed to remember all this stuff? Please do it. Tell me you'll do it. Yeah, okay, I'll do it. I've got to go. Goodbye. Susan hung up the phone and dashed out of the booth. Tal followed her, ducking inside the buildings as much as he could. He reached the alley a few minutes ahead of her to check it out. Trouble. 4 more sentries had moved in to take the place of the original 20, and they were fully alert. There was no way of knowing where Gilio and the 20 might be. Tal looked behind him. Susan was running full speed for the alley. Tal dove head first through the pavement and penetrated deep under the city, gaining speed, bringing forth his big silver sword. The power of God was increasing now. The saints must be praying somewhere. He could feel it. He only had seconds, and he knew it. He checked his bearings, made a wide subterranean sweep away from the hotel, and then, over a mile away, he circled back, gaining speed, gaining speed, gaining speed. Shining light, building power, faster, faster, faster. His sword a blinding lightning bolt, his eyes like fire, the earth a blur around him, the roar of passing clay boulders, pipe, and stone like a freight train. He held the sword crossways, the glimmering tip ready for that one infinitesimal moment. Quicker than a thought, like the explosion of a missile, a brilliant streak of light burst from the ground across the street and seemed to cut space in half as it pierced through the alley right across the eyes of all 4 demons. The demons, stunned and blinded, fell to the ground, stumbled about, tried to find each other. The streak of light vanished back into the ground as quickly as it came. Susan came around the corner and into the alley, heading for the window. Tal cupped his wings and braked himself. He had to get back to help her through that window before any demons could recover and sound an alarm. He snapped his wings into a violent forward rush and doubled back. Susan clambered up the crates and cans and onto the dumpster. The demons started to regain their vision and were rubbing their eyes. Tal emerged behind the fire escape, trying to judge the remaining time. Good. Gilio made it back and dropped like a hawk into the alley, grabbing Susan and thrusting her through the window in an instant, holding her up so she would not tumble to the floor inside. Gilio closed the window himself. Tal flew out to meet Gilio. One more time, he shouted. Nothing more needed to be said. The 4 sentries had recovered and were pouncing on them, and the other 20 had returned hot on Gilio's trail. Tal and Gilio shot into the air and streaked away, chased by a flock of frothing demons. The angels flew a course high over the city and kept their speed just slow enough to encourage the demons. They headed west off into the dark night sky, trailing brilliant white streaks behind them. The demons were tenacious in their pursuit for hundreds of miles, but eventually Tal looked back and found that they had given up the chase and returned to the city. Tal and Gilio picked up speed and headed for Ashton. In the ladies' room, Susan hurriedly rolled up the legs of her jeans, took her evening gown from its hook in the stall, and quickly resumed her proper appearance for the banquet. She removed the slippers and put them in her handbag, slipped on her dress shoes, and then opened the stall door and came out. A man's voice outside the lounge door called, "Susan, they're waiting for you." She checked her appearance in the mirror, combed her hair, and tried to calm her breathing. "Hasty, hasty, hasty," she called teasingly. With ladylike dignity, she finally emerged into the hallway and took the arm of the escort. He led her back to the grand ballroom, now filled with people, and showed her to her seat at the head table, giving the other escort a reassuring nod. Woo! Good stuff. All right, here we go. Chapter 19. The Clarion office was finally recovering the nice, healthy efficiency Marshall liked to see, and the new girl, Carmen, had a lot to do with it. In less than a week, she had taken the old bull by the horns and had more than filled Edie's shoes, reestablishing a tight office routine. It was only Wednesday, and already the paper was in full swing, heading for the Friday edition. Marshall stopped by Carmen's desk on his way to the coffee machine. She handed him some fresh copy and said, "Here, this is part of Tom's article." Marshall nodded. "Yeah, the first thing on the fire department. I've broken it down into three headings: staff, history, and goals, and figured we could run it in three parts. Tom already has it slotted for the next two pay stubs and thinks he can bump something for the third." Marshall was pleased. "Yeah, go with it. I like it. I'm glad you can read Tom's writing." Carmen had already proofread the bulk of the material for Friday and was halfway through the preparing of the copy for George, the typesetter. She had gone through the books and balanced all the accounts. She planned on helping Tom with the pay stub tomorrow. The negatives for the Sportsman Club layout were ready. Marshall shook his head with happy amazement. "Glad to have you aboard." Carmen smiled. "Thank you, sir." Marshall went to the coffee maker and poured 2 cups of coffee. Then it dawned on him. Carmen had found the cord to this full machine. He took the 2 cups back toward his office and gave her a smile of approval as he passed her desk. The location of her desk had been her only request on the job. She asked if it could be moved to a location right outside of Marshall's door, and Marshall was happy to comply. Now all he had to do was to turn and holler, and she would spring into action to do his bidding. Marshall went into his office and set his cup of coffee on his desk and offered the other cup to the long-haired, slightly dazed man sitting in the corner. Bernice sat in a chair she had been brought in with her own cup of coffee. "Now, where were we?" Marshall asked, sitting at his desk. Kevin Weed rubbed his face, took a sip of the coffee, and tried to pick up his thoughts again, looking around the floor as if he had dropped them down there somewhere. Marshall prompted, "Okay, let me at least make sure I got this straight. Now, you used to be the male acquaintance of this Susan, and she used to be the roommate of Pat Kruger, Bernice's sister. Have I got that right?" Weed nodded. Yeah, that's right. "So what was Susan doing at the carnival?" "Beats me. Like I said, she just came up behind me and said hi. I wasn't even looking for her. I couldn't believe it was her, you know. But she's got your phone number, and then she called you last night." "Yeah, all tripped out, all shook up. It was wild. She didn't make a lot of sense." Marshall looked at both Weed and Bernice and asked Bernice, "And this is the same ghostly looking woman you photographed that night?" Bernice was convinced. "The descriptions Kevin gave me match perfectly the woman I saw, and also that one older man who was with her." "Yeah, Casa," Kevin said the name as if it tasted bad. "All right," said Marshall. He made a list in his mind. "So let's just talk about this Casa first. Then we'll talk about Susan. And then we'll talk about Pat." Bernice had her notepad ready. "What's Casa's full name? Any idea?" He strained his brain. Alan? Alexander? Something like that. But it starts with an A? Yeah, right. Marshall asked, "What is he?" We'd answered, "Susan's new boyfriend, the guy she dumped me for." "So what does he do? Where does he work?" Weed shook his head. I don't know. He got bucks, though. He's a real wheeler dealer. When I first heard about him, he was hanging around Ashton and the college and talking about buying property and stuff. Man, the guy was loaded, and he liked everybody. He liked people to know it, too. Then he remembered. And Susan said he's trying to take over the town. "What town? This one?" "I guess." Bernice asked, "So where's he from?" Back east, maybe New York. I think he's the big city type." Marshall told Bernice, "Make a note for me to call Al Limley at the Times. He might be able to track this guy down if he's in New York." Bernice made the note. Marshall asked Weed, "What else do you know about him?" "He's weird, man, and he's into weird stuff." Marshall was getting impatient. "Come on, try harder." Weed stirred and fidgeted in his chair, trying to get comfortable about talking. "Well, he was like a guru or witch doctor or some kind of far out ooga booga man, and he got Susan into all that stuff." Bernice prodded. "Are you talking about Eastern mysticism?" "Yeah." "Pagan religions, meditation?" Yeah, all that stuff. He was into all that stuff. He and that That professor lady at the college, what's her name? Marshall was sick of the name. Langstrot. Wheat's face brightened with recollection. Yeah, that was it. Were Cassip and Langstrot associated? Were they friends? Yeah, sure. They were teaching some night classes together, I think. The ones that Susan was going to. Cassip was a special guest star or something. He really had everybody wild. I thought it was spooky. All right, so Susan was attending these classes and she got crazy. I mean, crazy. Man, she couldn't have been on a higher trip with mescaline. I couldn't even talk to her anymore. She was always way out in space, somewhere. We kept talking, starting to roll a little on his own. That's what really started to get me. How she and the rest of that bunch started, keeping secrets and talking in codes and not letting me in on what they were talking about. Susan just kept telling me I wasn't enlightened and I wasn't enlightened and I wouldn't understand. Man, she just gave it all to that Cassip guy and he took her. I mean, he really took her. He owns it now. She gone. She's gone. She had it. And was Langstrot mixed up in all of this? Oh yeah. But Cassip was the real heavy. He was the guru. Langstrot was his puppy dog. Bernice said, and now Susan gets your phone number and calls you after all this time. And she was scared, said we. She's in trouble. She said I was supposed to get in touch with you guys and tell you what I knew. She said she had some information on Pat. Bernice was longing to know. Did she say what kind of information? No, nothing. But she wants to get a hold of you. Well, why doesn't she just call? That question helped we to remember something. Oh, yeah. She thinks your phone might be bugged. Marshall and Bernice were silent for a moment. That was a comment they didn't know how seriously to take. We'd added, I guess she called me to be a go-between to tip you guys off. Marshall ventured. Like you're the only one she has left to trust? We'd only shrugged. Bernice asked, what do you know about Pat? Did Susan ever tell you anything while you were still going together? One of Weed's most painful undertakings was trying to remember things. She and Pat were good friends for a while, but Susan left us all out in the cold when she started following after that Cassip bunch. She kind of pushed me off and Pat too. They didn't get along very well after that. And Susan kept saying how Pat was just like me, trying to get in the way, not enlightening, dragging her feet. Marshall thought of the question, didn't wait for Bernice to ask it. So, would you say that this Cassip bunch may have regarded Pat as an enemy? Man, Reed remembered some more. She did stick her neck out. I mean, she got in the way. Her and Susan had a real fight once about the stuff Susan was getting into. Pat didn't trust Cassip and kept telling Susan she was brainwashed. Weed's eyes brightened a little. Yeah, I talked to Pat once. We were sitting at a game and we talked about what Susan was getting into and how Cassip was controlling her. And Pat was really shook up about it, just like I was. And I guess Pat and Susan really had some fights about it until Susan finally moved out of the dorm and ran off with Cassip. Boy, she dropped out of her classes and everything. So what did Pat make any enemies? I mean, real enemies? We kept digging up new things that had been buried under years of alcohol. Yeah, maybe she did. It was after Susan ran off with this Cassip guy. Pat told me she was going to check the whole thing out once and for all. I think she may have gone to see that Professor Langstrot a few times. A while later, I ran into her again. She was sitting in the cafeteria on campus, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. I asked her how she was, and she would hardly even talk to me. I asked her how her investigation was going, her checking out Cassip and Langstrop and stuff, and she said she quit doing anything about it, and that it was no big deal. I thought that was a little weird. She'd been so torn up about it before. I asked her, hey, are they coming after you now? She wouldn't talk about it. She said I wouldn't understand. Then she said something about some instructor, some guy that was helping her out, and that she was doing okay. And I got the message that she didn't want me butting in, so I just sort of left her there. Did her behavior seem strange to you? Bernice asked. Did she seem like herself? No way. Hey, if she hadn't been so against that whole Casa Langstra bunch, I would have thought she was one of them. She had that same kind of dopey, lost and baked look all over her. When? Just when was it you saw her like that? We knew, but he hated to say it. Just a little while before they found her dead. Did she seem afraid? Did she give you any indication of any enemies, anything like that? We, he grimaced, trying to remember. She wouldn't talk to me. But I saw her once after that and tried to ask her about Susan, and she acted like I was some kind of mugger or something. She hollered, "Leave me alone, leave me alone." And she tried to pull away, and then she saw it was me. And she looked all around like somebody was following her. Who? Did she say who? We looked at the ceiling. Oh, what was that guy's name? Bernice leaning forward, hanging on to his words. There was somebody. Thomas. Some guy named Thomas. Thomas? Did she ever say his last name? I don't remember any last name. I never met the guy. Never saw him, but he sure must have owned her. She acted like he was following her all around, talking to her, maybe threatening her. I don't know. She seemed pretty afraid of him. Thomas, Bernice whispered. She said to Weed, "Is there anything else about this Thomas? Anything at all?" I never saw him. She didn't say who he was or where she would meet him, but it was kind of strange. One minute she'd be talking like he was the greatest thing that ever happened to her. And then the next minute she'd be hiding out saying he was following her. Bernice got up and headed for the door. "I think we might have a college roster somewhere." She began rummaging through the desk and shelves of the front office. Weed fell silent. He looked tired. Marshall reassured him. "You're doing fine, Kevin. Hey, it's been a while. I don't know if this is important. Consider everything important. Well, this stuff about Pat having some new instructor, I think some of the Casa bunch, maybe it was Susan, they had instructors. But I thought Pat didn't want anything to do with that group." Yeah, that's right. Marshall shifted directions. "So where did you fit into all these going on besides your relationship with Susan?" "Hey, nowhere. I didn't want anything to do with it, man." "Were you going to the school?" "Yeah, taking accounting. Man, when all this started coming down and then Pat killed himself, hey, I got out of there fast. I didn't want to be next, you know?" He looked at the floor. "My life has been nothing but hell ever since." "You working?" "Yeah, log and crew for Gorse Brothers up above Baker." He shook his head. "I didn't think I'd ever see Susan again." Marshall turned to his desk and searched for some paper. "Well, we'll have to keep in touch. Let me have your number and address at work and at home." We gave Marshall the information. "And if I'm not there, you could probably find me at the Evergreen Tavern in Baker." "Okay. Listen, if you hear anything else from Susan, you let us know day or night." He gave Weed his card with his home phone number and added. Bernice came back in with the roster. "Marshall, you have a call. I think it's urgent," she said. Then she turned to Weed. "Kevin, let's you and I step outside and go through this roster. Maybe we'll find that guy's full name." Weed stepped outside with Bernice as Marshall picked up the phone. "Hogan," he said. "Hogan, this is Ted Harmer." Marshall scrambled for a pencil. "Hi, Ted. Thank you for calling. So you talked to Eldon, and Eldon talked to you?" Harmer sighed and said, "You're in trouble, Hogan. I'll give you one interview. Got a pencil handy?" "I'm ready. Shoot." Bernice had just said goodbye to Weed and seen him to the door when Marshall emerged from his office with a scribbled on piece of paper in his hand. "Any luck?" he said. "Zilch. There are no Thomases of any kind, first or last name." "It's still a lead, though. Who's that on the phone?" Marshall produced a scrap of paper. Thank God for small favors. That was Ted Harmer. Bernice brightened considerably as Marshall explained. "He wants to see me tomorrow, and here are the directions." Must be a way back in the sticks. The guy is still paranoid as all get out. I'm surprised he didn't make me wear a disguise or something. He wouldn't say anything about all of this? No, not over the phone. It just has to be the two of us in private. Marshall leaned over just a little and said, "He's another one who thinks our phone might be bugged. So how do we make sure it isn't?" "Make that one of your assignments. Now here's the rest of them." Bernice grabbed a notepad off her desk and made her list as Marshall spoke. Check the New York phone book. I did. No ACASIP listed. Scratch that one. Next, check around with the local real estate offices. If Weed's right about CASIP looking for property around here, some of those people might know something. And I'd look around in the commercial listings as well. Mm-hmm. And while you're at it, find out what you can about whoever owns Joe's Market. It's not Joe. No. The place used to belong to Joe and Angelina Carlucci, Carlucci. I want to know where they went and who owns the store now. See if you can get some straight answers. And you were going to check with your friend at the Times? Yeah, Limley. Marshall added a note to his piece of paper. That it? That's it for now. In the meantime, let's get back to running this paper. All the time, all through their meeting with Weed and their following conversation, Carmen sat at her desk, busily working and acting like she hadn't heard a word. The morning had been tight, with the next issue's deadline galloping upon them, but by noon the pay stuff was ready to go the printer, and the office had a chance to resume its normal pace. Marshall put in a call to Limley, his old comrade in arms at the New York Times. Limley got all the information Marshall had on this strange character, CASIP, saying he'd get right on it. Marshall hung up the phone with one hand and grabbed his suit jacket with the other. His next stop was his afternoon appointment with the reclusive Ted Harmel. Bernice drove off for her appointed stops. She parked her red Toyota in the parking lot of what used to be Joe's Market and was now called the Ashton Mercantile, and went into the store. About a half hour later, she returned to her car and drove away. It had been a wasted trip. No one knew anything. They only worked there. The manager wasn't in, and they had no idea when he'd be back. Some had never heard of Joe Carlucci. Some had, but didn't know what happened to him. The assistant manager finally asked her to quit bothering all of the employees on company time. So much for getting straight answers. Now it was off to the realty offices. Johnson Smith Realty occupied an old house remodeled into an office on the edge of the business part of town. The house still had very charming front yards, with a redwood tree standing tall in the middle of it and a quaint log cabin mailbox out front. It was warm and welcoming inside and quiet. 2 desks occupied what used to be the living room. Both were empty at the time. On the walls hung bulletin boards with snapshots of house after house, with cards below each photograph describing the building, the property, the view, nearness to shopping, and so forth. And last but not least, the price. Boy, what people would pay these days for a house. At a third desk in what used to be the dining room, a young lady stood and smiled at Bernice. Hi, can I help you? She asked. Bernice smiled back and introduced herself and asked, I need to ask a question that might seem a little odd, but here goes. Are you ready? Ready. Have you done any business with anyone by the name of A. Cassip in the last year or so? How do you spell that? Bernice spelled it for her, then explained. You see, I'm trying to get in touch with him. It's just a personal matter, but I was wondering if you might have a phone number, an address, or anything. The young lady looked at the name she had just written on a piece of paper and said, Well, I'm new here, so I don't know, but let me ask Rosemary. In the meantime, might I have a look through your microfiche? Sure. You know how to run it? Yes. The lady went towards the back of the house where Rosemary, apparently the boss lady, had her office in a back bedroom. Bernice could hear Rosemary talking on the phone. Getting an answer from her might take a while. Bernice went to the microfiche reader. Where to start? She looked at a map of Ashton and vicinity on the wall and found the location of Joe's Market. The hundreds of little celluloid plates were arranged by section, township, quarters, and street numbers. Bernice had to do a lot of looking back and forth to get all the numbers off the map. Finally, she thought she might have found the right microfiche to put into the viewer. Excuse me, came a voice. It was Rosemary, marching down the hall toward her with a grim expression on her face. Miss Kruger, I'm afraid the microfilm is only for the use of our staff. Is there something you'd like for me to find for you? Bernice kept cool and tried to keep things flowing. Sure, I'm sorry. I was trying to find out the new owner of Joe's Market. I wouldn't know. Well, I thought it might be on the machine here somewhere. No, I don't think so. It's been a while since the files have been updated. Well, could we look anyway? Rosemary totally ignored the question. Is there anything else you'd like to know? Bernice stood firm and unshaken. Well, there was my original question. Have you done any business with anyone named Cassip in the last year or so? No, I've never heard the name. Well, perhaps someone else on your staff, they've never heard it either. Bernice was a Bernice was about to question that, but Rosemary interrupted. I would know. I know all of their accounts. Bernice thought of one other thing. You wouldn't have a cross reference file, would you? No, we don't, Rosemary answered very abruptly. Now, is there anything else? Bernice was tired of being nice. Well, Rosemary, even if there was, I'm sure you would not be able or willing to supply it. I'm leaving now, so breathe easy. She left hurriedly, feeling very lied to. All right, chapter 20. Marshall, and we're reading for those joining us, This Present Darkness. Marshall was beginning to worry about his shock absorbers. This old logging road had more potholes than surface. Apparently, it wasn't used that much anymore by the logging companies, but was left to hunters and hikers who knew the area well enough to keep from getting lost. Marshall did not. He looked again at the scribbled directions and then at the odometer. Boy, the miles go by slowly on roads like this one. Marshall bumped his way around the gravelly corner and finally saw a vehicle ahead, parked alongside the road. Yes, an old Valiant. It was Harmel. Marshall pulled up behind the Valiant and got out. Ted Harmel got out of his car dressed in clothing for outdoors, wool shirt, faded jeans, work boots, and a wool cap. He looked the way he sounded, exhausted and very scared. Hogan? He asked. Yeah, said Marshall, extending his hand. Harmel shook it and then turned away abruptly. Come on with me. Marshall followed Harmel to a trail off the road, and they hiked among the tall timber, picking their way through logs, rocks, and underbrush. Marshall was wearing a suit, and his shoes were definitely the wrong kind for this sort of terrain, but he wasn't about to complain. He recaptured the big fish that got away. At last, Harmel seemed satisfied with their seclusion. He went to a huge fallen log, weathered and bleached by years of changing seasons, and sat down on it. Marshall joined him. I want to thank you for calling me, Marshall said for an opener. We never had this meeting, Harmel said bluntly. Is that an agreement? You got it. Now, what do you want to know about me? Not much. You used to be the editor of the Clarion. Eugene Baylor and the other college regents were on your case. You and Eldon Strachan are friends? Marshall reviewed quickly all that he had learned, which was mostly what he and Bernice had gleaned from the old Clarion articles. Harmel nodded. Yeah, all that's true. Eldon and I are still friends. We went through basically the same thing, so that gives us sort of a camaraderie. As far as the molesting of Marla Jarrett, Adam Jarrett's girl, that was a bizarre setup. I don't know who coached her or how, but somebody got that girl to say all the right words to the police. I do find it significant that the whole matter was settled so quietly. What I was supposed to have done is a felony. You just don't settle things like that quietly. Why did it happen, Ted? What did you do to bring it on yourself? I got too involved. You're right about Julene and all the others. It's a secret society, a club, a whole network of people. Nobody has any secrets from anybody else. The eyes of the group are everywhere. They watch what you do, what you say, what you think, how you feel. They're working toward what they call a universal mind. The concept that sooner or later all the inhabitants of the world will make a giant evolutionary leap and meld into one global brain, one transcending consciousness. Harmel stopped and looked at Marshall. I'm spilling it as it come to me. Is it making sense? Marshall had to compare Harmel's spillings with what he already knew. Every person affiliated with this exclusive network subscribes to these ideals? Yeah. The whole thing is built around occult ideals, Eastern mysticism, and cosmic consciousness. That's why they meditate and do psychic readings and try to meld their minds together. Is this what they do in Langstraat's therapy sessions? Yes, exactly. Every person who joins the network goes through a certain initiation process. They meet with Julene and learn to achieve altered states of consciousness, psychic powers, and out-of-body experiences. The sessions could involve just one person or several, but Julene is at the core of it, like some guru, and we were all her disciples. We all became like one growing, interdependent organism trying to become one with the universal mind. You said something about melding your minds together? ESP, telepathy, whatever. Your thoughts are not your own, and neither is your life. You're only one segment of the whole. Julene's highly skilled in such things. She knew my every thought. She owned me. This part became very difficult for Harmel to speak about. He grew tense and his voice faltered and dropped in volume. Maybe she still does. Sometimes I still hear her calling to me, moving through my brain. Does she own all the others as well? Harmel nodded. Yeah, everybody owns everybody, and they won't stop until they own that whole town. I could see it coming. Anybody who gets in their way suddenly drops out of sight. And that's why I'm still wondering about Edie. Ever since this whole thing started happening, I've been leery about anyone just dropping out of the picture suddenly. What danger would Edie be to them? Maybe she's just one more step toward taking you out. I wouldn't be surprised. They took out Eldon. They took out me. They took out Jefferson. Who's Jefferson? The district judge. I don't know how they did it, but suddenly he decided he wouldn't run for re-election. He sold his home, left town. No one's heard from him since. And now Baker's in. He's not part of the network. He's owned. So, did you know this at the time you had your little crime settled so quietly? Harmel nodded. He told me he could make it really rough for me, turn me over to the county prosecutor, and then it would be out of his hands. He knew good and well it was a frame-up. He had me checkmated, so I took him up on it. I got out of town. Marshall took out a pad and pen. Who else do you know that belongs to this bunch? Harmel looked away. If I tell you too much, they'll trace it back to me. You'll have to find out for yourself. All I can do is point you in the right direction. Check the mayor's office and the town council. See who's new there and who they replace. They've had a lot of turnover lately. Marshall made a note of it. You've got Brummel? Yeah, Brummel, Young, Baker. Check the county land commissioner and the president at the independent bank. And Harmel kept probing his memory. The county comptroller. I've got him on the list. The board of regents at the college? Yeah. Say, wasn't it the tiff with them that got you run out of town? That was only part of it. I wasn't controllable anymore. I got in the way. The network took care of me before I could hurt them. But there is no way I can prove it. Doesn't matter anyway. The whole thing's too big. It's like a huge organism, a cancer that just keeps spreading. You can't go after just one part of it like the regions and expect to kill the whole thing. It's everywhere, at every level. Are you religious? In a limited sense, I suppose. Well, you're going to need something to fight it. It's spiritual, Hogan. It doesn't listen to reason or to the law or to any sort of morals but its own. They don't believe in any God. They are God. Harmel paused to calm down and then took on a different note. I first got involved with Julene when I wanted to do a story on some of the so-called research she was doing. I was intrigued by it all. The parapsychology, the strange phenomena she was documenting. I started having these counseling sessions with her myself. I let her read and photograph my aura and my energy field. I let her probe my mind and meld our thoughts. I went into it after a novelty story, actually, but I got hooked, and I couldn't tear myself away from it. After a while, I started picking up on some of the same things she was heavily involved in. I'd leave my body and go into space, talk to my instructors. Harmel caught himself. Oh man, that's right. You're never going to believe any of this stuff. Marshall was firm, and maybe he did believe it. Tell me anyway. Harmel gritted his teeth and looked toward the sky. He fumbled, he stammered. His face went pale. I don't know. I don't think I can tell you. They'll find out. Who'll find out? The network. We're out in the middle of nowhere, Ted. It doesn't matter. You used the word instructors. Who are they? Harmel only sat there trembling, terror etched in his face. Hogan, he said finally, you can't cross them. I can't tell you. They'll know about it. But who are they? Can you at least tell me that? I don't even know if they're real, Harmel muttered. That's all. Inner teachers, spirit guides, ascended masters. They're called all kinds of things, but anyone who follows Julene's teachings for very long invariably gets mixed up with them. They come from nowhere. They speak to you. Sometimes they appear to you when you're meditating. Sometimes you visualize them yourself, but then they take on a life and a personality of their own. It's not just your imagination anymore. But what are they? beings, entities. Sometimes they're just like real people. Sometimes you only hear a voice. Sometimes you only feel them like spirits, I suppose. Julene works for them, or maybe they work for her. I don't know which way it goes, but you can't hide from them. You can't run. You can't get away with anything. They're part of the network. The network knows everything, controls everything. Julene controlled me. She even came between me and Gail. I lost my wife over this whole thing. I started to do everything Julene told me. She'd call me in the middle of the night and tell me to come over, and I'd come over. She'd tell me not to print a certain story. I wouldn't print it. She'd tell me what kind of news to cover, and I'd print it just like she said. She owned me, Hogan. She could have told me to take a gun and shoot myself, and maybe I would have done it. You gotta know her to understand what I'm saying. Marshall remembered standing in the hallway outside of Langstraat's class, wondering how he got there. I think I understand. But Eldon found out about the college finances, and we both checked into it, and he was right. The college was headed for the rocks, and I'm sure it still is. Eldon tried to stop it to get the whole mess straightened out. I tried to help him. Julian came after me right away and made all kinds of threats. I ended up going in two directions, following two different loyalties. It was like being torn apart inside. Maybe that's what snapped me out of it. I made up my mind I wasn't going to be controlled anymore, not by the network, not by anyone. I was a newspaperman. I had to print it the way I saw it. And they took care of you. And it came as a total surprise. Well, maybe not total. When the police came to the paper and arrested me, I almost knew what it was about. It was something I could have predicted from the way Julene and the others were threatening me. They've done that sort of thing before. For instance, I can't help thinking the real estate offices, the tax rolls, any information you can get on the properties around the town might show something. I couldn't follow it up when I was still there, but all the recent real estate deals didn't feel quite right to me. The real estate business wasn't feeling quite right to Bernice either. Just as she pulled up in front of Tyler and Sons Realty, she saw the owner, Albert Tyler, locking up the place and getting ready to leave. She rolled down her car window and asked him, "Say, aren't you supposed to be open until 5?" Tyler only smiled and shrugged. "Not on Thursdays." Bernice could read the hours on the front door. "But your hours say Monday through Friday, 10 to 5. Tyler got just a little cross. "Not on Thursdays," I said. Bernice noticed Tyler's son, Calvin, driving his Volkswagen out from behind the building. She got out of her car and waved him down. Unwillingly, he paused and rolled down his window. "Yeah," he said. "Aren't you people usually open on Thursdays till 5? Calvin only shrugged and made a face. "Well, I know. The old man said go home. We all go home." He drove off. Old man Tyler was getting into his Plymouth. Bernice ran up to the car and waved to get his attention. He was really miffed by now. He rolled down his window and said gruffly, "Lady, we're closed and I have to get home. I just wanted to look through your microfiche. I need some information on some property." He shook his head. "Hey, I can't help you anyway. Our microfiche is broken down." "What?" But Tyler rolled up his window and pulled away, screeching his tires a little. Bernice shouted angrily after him, "Did Rosemary tip you off?" She hurried to her car. There was still the Top of the Town Realty. She knew the owner regularly helped out with youth baseball on Thursday afternoons. Maybe the other gal who worked there wouldn't know who she was. Harmon looked grim and haggard as he said, "They'll do you in, Hogan. They have the clout and the connections to do it. Look at me. I lost all I owned, lost my wife and family. They cleaned me out. They'll do the same to you." Marshall wanted answers, not doomsaying. "What do you know about some guy named Cassip?" Harmon grimaced with fresh disgust. "Go after that. He might be the source of all the trouble. Julene worshipped that guy. Everybody did Julene's bidding, but she did his. Do you know whether or not he was looking for any real estate around Ashton? He was drooling over that college. I know that." Marshall was taken aback. "The college? Keep going." "I never got the chance to dig after it, but there might be something there. Talk around the network said that the college would be taken over entirely by some network higher-ups, and Eugene Baylor seemed to be spending a lot of time talking money with Cassip or his reps. Cassip was trying to buy the college. He hasn't yet, but he did end up buying everything else around town. Like what? A lot of homes, I know, but I couldn't find out very much. Like I said, check the tax rolls or the real estate offices to see if he's been buying up anything else. I know he had the bucks to do it. Harmel pulled a ragged manila envelope from under his jacket. And take this off my hands, will you? Marshall took the envelope. What is it? A curse. That's what it is. Something happens to everyone who has it. Eldon's accountant friend, Ernie Johnson, gave it to me, and I hope Eldon told you what happened to him. He told me. It's Johnson's findings from the college accounting office. Marshall couldn't believe his luck. You gotta be kidding. Did Eldon know about this? No. I just came across them myself, but don't start dancing yet. You'd better get some accountant friend of your own to try and decipher it for you. It doesn't make much sense to me. I think there's still a whole other half of it missing. It's a start. Thanks. If you want to play with theories, try this out. Cassup comes to Ashton and wants to buy everything he can get his hands on. The college is not even thinking of selling. Next thing you know, thanks to Baylor, the college gets itself into such deep financial trouble that selling may be the only way to get out of it. Suddenly, Cassup's offer isn't so far-fetched, and by now the Board of Regents is stacked with yaysayers. Marshall opened the envelope and leafed through the pages and pages of photocopied columns and figures. And you couldn't find any leads in all of this? More leads you don't need, not as much as proof. What you really need to see is who's on the other end of all those transactions. Cassup's books, perhaps? With all the friends and Confederates he has at that college, I wouldn't be surprised if Cassup was coming back to buy the college with its own money. That's some theory. But what would a man like that even want with a little town or with a whole college? Hogan, a guy with the power and bucks that guy seems to have, could take a town like Ashton and do anything he wanted with it. I think he already has to a great extent. How do you know? Just check it out. All right, 17, 18, 19, and 20. That brings us to our 4 chapters end on today. Oh my. The plot thickens in Ashton community and in the community of Ashton. Well, thank you all once again for joining me. I'm Pastor Trina Turner. You have spent an hour and a half with Reading with Lady T and our current book, This Present Darkness. We're just going to, like we always do, close out in prayer and just ask God, Auntie M. Juicy, ask God for his covering and his protection and just for him to continue to be God over our lives. Heavenly Father, we love you and we thank you. God, we thank you just for being God. We thank you for choosing us and we in turn choose you. You are Lord of Lords, King of Kings, and we give your name all of the glory. God, I thank you for this time of entertainment and this time of reading, but we do recognize that there are good and evil sources and forces in the world. But God, you are all powerful. You're omnipotent. You're greater than any power and any spirit. God, we thank you that we can choose these fictional characters that'll teach us about spiritual warfare. No doubt they're enemies, forces that want to destroy us and cause us to act in certain ways. Right now, we rebuke the hand of the enemy, and God, we ask that you protect each person on this line. God, let us draw in more to you. Let us be the prayer covering that we read about. We pray for all of our ministries, all of our churches, all of our leaders in our churches, all of our men and women of God, all of those that are doing ministry. We pray for the fathers and mothers, aunties and uncles, grandmothers and grandfathers. We pray for our leaders, hallelujah, in all of our workplaces. And we thank you for this reading on today. Now let each and every person finish their dinner, prepare for the evening, and have a nice, peaceful rest. And we give your name glory and honor. Amen. All right. Thank you all so much. We'll see you again next week, Monday. All right, right here, same time, same channel. God bless. Love you all. Yeah, went fast tonight. Love you all. Bye-bye.